So I know when I'm meeting with a prospective client, generally within the first 5 or 10 minutes of conversation with them, I get a pretty good gut feeling as to whether or not they're going to be a successful client. Particularly from a coachability perspective. Well, what have you found in your nonprofit world when you're first meeting with a person who says they want to create a nonprofit? What kind of questions do you ask, and what are you looking for that gives you a warm, fuzzy feeling that they're actually going to accomplish what they go after?
Well, clearly the passion for their mission, and are they going to be consistent towards that mission?
Mm-hmm.
And really, what's their integrity, and how do they build trust with me? When I first started out doing nonprofit advising, I took on anybody, and I thought I could take anybody. Now I tell folks I'm interviewing them. So it's like whoever I take on is going to be successful. So I'm interviewing
Mm-hmm.
you.
Hello, and welcome to the Generate Your Value podcast. I'm your co-host, Andy McDowell, founder and owner of Generate Your Value, providing self-leadership, leadership, and business coaching services for corporate executives and business owners.
And I'm Zach Levy, your other co-host. I run a nationwide financial service business with my wife, Megan.
Together, Zach and I have the intention to bring you tips, concepts, ideas, suggestions, stories, and analogies from A to Z, which will help you to grow your personal brand and leadership skills in such a way that joy, happiness, and success, as you define it for yourself, are achieved.
We hope to use our gifts, talents, and experiences in business and leadership to generate value in your life. And with that being said, let's move to our topic for today.
Hello, and welcome to the Generate Your Value podcast. My name is Andy McDowell. No, not the actress. I'm the Andy McDowell. You just weren't aware of it. Unfortunately, my partner in crime, Zach Levy's having some technical issues getting in. He may pop in the middle of this interview. We'll welcome him in if he does have an ability to show up today. But that doesn't mean we're not going to have a great conversation today. Last season, we had an episode on nonprofit organizations with Teresa Huff, where we kind of concentrated the conversation on grant writing. And today we're going to bring in a guest who's going to talk to us about how to start one and the overall structure. So before we even get to grant writing, and we have an idea or a desire or a passion in the nonprofit side, how do we go about taking some actions against that passion to make it a reality? So my guest today is Colonel Vince Lindenmeyer. And let me read his bio and then we'll bring him in. Colonel Vince Lindenmeyer, PhD, U.S. Army retired. That's quite a title. Is a socially conscious entrepreneur and investor desiring to heal others through the sacred activism community, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, which is led by his wife, Dr. Cynthia Ramirez Lindenmeyer. Vince owns Beacon Foresight Group, a nonprofit advisory firm helping veterans, women, and minorities start nonprofits or businesses to close the economic equality gap. A portion of his proceeds goes to the sacred activism community each month. Colonel Lindenmeyer served a 26-year career with overseas tours to Korea, Egypt, Qatar, and Iraq, earning a Bronze Star Medal. As an educator, Dr. Lindenmeyer has taught face-to-face and distance learning over the past 20 years. He earned a BS in Systems Engineering at West Point, an MS in Logistics Management, a Master's in Education and Strategic Studies at the U.S. Army War College, and a PhD in Education, and he resides in the great state of Florida. So, Colonel, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you today.
Thank you, Andy. Appreciate the kind introduction. And I do know Teresa Huff. I work with her regularly because what's the first thing a nonprofit leader needs to do is figure out how to do grant writing.
Right.
So Teresa's a great great resource for me as well.
Well, we kind of put the horse before the cart, right? Bringing her in first before we brought you in, but that's okay. It's all important things. So on our podcast, we love storytelling, and so we always ask our guests when they first come on to talk about their life story and how it is that they followed their life journey to the point that they are in today. So, can you give our listening audience a little background on why West Point, why engineering, why a life of service, all those type things? What was going on there in your
Great
life?
questions. Well, I'm a first generation
Mm.
military. I grew up in Clemson, South Carolina, and my father was a professor of industrial engineering at Clemson, South Carolina. We moved there in 1978, and then started my first business, was selling Clemson novelties outside the stadium. I'm a Clemson fan. It was a paper fan for $1. We made them for 33.5 cents, and the Clemson greats would sign the paper fan. It was a signature autograph item. And I got escorted out of the stadium a few times for violating the monopoly laws
Oh.
because I did not have the monopoly. And I didn't understand that as a 13-year-old, that what about this free market? But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, I digress. My father taught Army officers flowing through Clemson to go back to West Point to teach engineering. And as an Eagle Scout, laying on the couch talking to an Army officer, not even standing up, they'd said, "Hey, you should really think about going to West Point. It'd really help out your old man. It's free." They were like laying it on thick. And even one of them would throw the brochure
Mm-hmm.
on the couch, and like, "Hey, I'll take a look at it." Any strapping young boy in South Carolina wants to go to the Citadel. And in 8th grade, as a Boy Scout, we took a Boy Scout trip to the Citadel, and I saw the square, and I saw the mess hall, and I was hook, line, and sinker. I'm going to the Citadel.
In
And
the great
again,
city
the
of
Army
Charleston.
officers go,
Yeah.
beautiful, yeah. And it was probably the best time of weather that we would go there. October football game. It was so you didn't have the sticky mosquitoes
Mm-hmm.
and the humidity. But again, it went back to the Army officers like, hey, you got to pay for your uniforms at Citadel, and West Point's free. In fact, they pay you. So it gradually kicked in. And as I moved through high school, I became a fairly competitive pole vaulter. I pole vaulted 15 feet and got the attention of Army track. And then that helped me get in. And so my twin brother, though, Vic Lindenmeyer, uh, he did not get in for class of '90. So the director of admissions, Colonel Rushton, actually called my father and said, I need a kitchen table talk with your two sons." And so they sat us down and said, "Okay, twins normally do better if they stay in the same class. Would you two be willing to go to prep school together?" So we became West Point prepsters, and that's a great year that we did from 86 to
Mm-hmm.
87, then went on to West Point and graduated in 1991. Part of my branch selection was because of, hey, I want to be a systems engineer. It was the closest degree to industrial,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt like, well, if I was a third generation, my grandfather taught engineering technology at Northwestern. My dad went to Northwestern. He became a professor. And I was like, well, following this lineage, I better do something engineering. So the closest was systems engineering, and I did enjoy it. And a funny story about I had a professor, Rick Paradiso, who had my dad at Clemson. And I worked so hard on this project one time, and I had Captain Paradiso for a class, and he wrote in red pen on the top of a project I did, "Work smarter, not harder." And that's what my dad told Rick on that thing. So he got me back.
Mm.
And I didn't do as well on that project as I wanted to. So I got the "work smarter, uh, not harder" motif from my father's protege. So I got protegeed by the protege. And, you know, father industrial engineer, Eagle Scout, first generation military, really kind of discovering this. Parents were so proud that we went to West Point. Really, moving into the Army, I was going to do 5 years and get out, become a vice president of manufacturing, use my engineering degree. And what the Army does is you constantly get opportunities to learn. And as a lifelong learner, I loved it. That's why you're reading out all those master's
Mm.
degrees, because it's like, hey, they're going to send me back to school. I might as well go. And so I was a lifelong learner and fortunate to serve 26 years and fortunate to, hate to cut to the chase, but generate my value, the name of your podcast, for senior officers. It's like, yes, I was an infantryman to start. I was in ordnance or maintenance. I was in logistics. And then I finally moved into strategy. It was called strategic plans and policy. And I was an advisor to generals such as General Abizade, Scaparrotti, Secretary Austin now, who is a 2-star, and I worked for him. Probably the most intimidating boss I ever worked for was General Austin.
Mm.
And you'd knock on his door and he'd say, "What do you want?" And it was like you were the scarecrow talking to. You're like, "Oh my gosh, why did I ever think to knock on this
Mm.
door? I forgot what I was going to ask you, sir."
Mm.
So it was a pleasure to serve those great leaders. And how I generated my value is I got stuff done. It's like, give it to Lindenmeyer, he'll do it. Because in these big military industrial complexes, as you know, Andy, or um, bureaucracies, it's like you can have a whole conference room full of people that will talk about how to do it, will theorize how to do it,
Mm.
will tell you exactly how to do it. But it's like the general at the head of the table is like, who's going to flip and do it? And I got a reputation for getting it done. So being a strategic thinker, being educated, understanding the theory behind it, but being very pragmatic and doing it. And so that was me generating value, and that's how I was fortunate to get promoted and make full colonel. I served my 3 years, and my final assignment was U.S. Strategic Command, and my final job was Battle Watch Commander. How cool is that? It sounds like you're like at the helm of the Enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
And so the night shift was space, cyber, and nuclear domains. And if anything happened across any of those, as the colonel, you had to wake the 4-star. And fortunately, I had great 4-star bosses who were like, Lindy, thanks for waking me up. I appreciate that. And they were always very kind hearted about waking them up in the middle of the night.
Right.
And of course, at an Air Force command, you had to have a call sign. So I was Lindy. So that's a little bit about, uh, how I got drawn into the military. And of course, the lifetime of service, you do serve your country. You end up learning to serve your soldiers. Great leaders eat last, and those great books, you learn that firsthand. And it translates to when you finally get out. I got out in 2016, and every veteran has trouble transitioning. It's like, who am I serving now? And it was about serving others. I was sitting on the couch again. I guess all my great stories start from sitting on the couch. And my Reverend Dr. Lindenmeyer, wonderful wife, said, "Vince, I have a mission for you." And I perked up like the dog that's going to get to go for a walk or
Mm-hmm.
something. And she said, there's an African American, fairly uh, famous civil rights activist who's had a stroke, and he does this tour through the civil rights trail through the deep south. So it goes to Birmingham,
Selma.
Selma,
Yeah.
Memphis, even Atlanta. And he's had a stroke, and I need you to make sure that this tour goes in 5 months. So I went into North Omaha, which was, wow, I felt uncomfortable again. It was like working in a deployed zone. Like, okay, this is Omaha, Black Omaha. This is North Omaha. And Omaha is one of the most segregated cities in the country still, believe it or not. We have a North Omaha, a South Omaha, Then we have suburban West Omaha. And I could clearly see that my white privilege had begun to, wow, maybe I was a full colonel because I was a white male. Maybe I got all these opportunities because I was a white male. I really started to see that I had a lot of knowledge to give to the nonprofit community. And I still have a very close friendship with Preston Love Jr. of the Black Votes Matter Institute of Community Engagement. We just wrote a city ARPA grant for $950,000 that we hope to be awarded. And so, you know, these type of relationships, it's like, wow, I have experience, and then I have a target community that really needs my help, and I feel like this lifetime of service to others is still going on. But the one key to serving others and serving our country and lifetime of service to others is I've learned that I got to take care of myself
Hmm.
and self-care in order to sustain serving others, because we often lose sight of it's very addicting to serve others and it becomes happenstance, but we put off taking care of ourselves. We put off eating right. We put off drinking the extra glass of water versus coffee. Just the little things that get put off long enough to where all of a sudden our health and sanity suffer. And so we have to take care of ourselves in order to continue to serve
Hmm.
others. But I've been on a soapbox for a while, Andy, so I'll throw it back over to you.
Well, it's a lot. It's a lot of great stuff. Do you feel like you were a service-oriented person when you were growing up as a kid, or is it something that really got instilled with you when you joined the military, or where did that switch kind of flip for you?
I think more so, I'm a team sport
Mm.
guy. Like, even though I was a pole vaulter and pretty good at it, I looked at the fact that I was scoring points for the track team. And I was an all conference outside linebacker. And, you know, that was very team. So I was a much more team sport oriented. And I believe that's where serving others is like, this is a team and I have a role to play. And um, I want to be on a winning team. And I think team sport is the way I kind of got pulled into serving others, is that it's very rewarding to be on teams that where people know their role and they're doing things and you're able to accomplish goals. So team sport would be where I would kind of reside on that.
Do you find it very fulfilling, a life of service?
I wouldn't say I have a life of service, but I guess in comparison to others, maybe it gets you out of bed. Um, the reason I tell people I do nonprofit advising now is it gets me out of bed. That I have, hey, I got 3 clients that need me today. We're having a weekly huddle. We're going to go through compliance, but there's oftentimes I've been fortunate to start 2 nonprofits even this week, and just really asking the questions to a future executive director about truly scanning the environment and saying, are you sure those 3 competitors per se in the same region doing the same thing you're doing, are they going to detract from what you're trying to do? Or how can you take on an abundance mindset and go talk to those other
Hmm.
providers and build a network, and so I take people through fully understanding their environment and building their network. And then oftentimes I really talk to folks about changing the channel from a scarcity mindset to abundance mindset, not look at competitors, but try to build an abundant network where, hey, we're all fulfilling a niche and our sum shows a greater good. So the parts will add up to a greater
Hmm.
good. And that's really some of the components that I coach new executive directors through, is understanding their environment, building an abundance mindset, and building a trusted network that's going to support them as they grow their nonprofit. And just today, I gently warned a new nonprofit executive director, hey, this is going to take about 3 years to get you into a comfortable place. This is about a 3-year push to grow something to something.
Mm-hmm.
Because they tripped into a statement where they were going to quit their job, and they said the nonprofit was going to pay them $70,000, and I needed to let them know, you may not want to quit your day job. You may want to think of this as a side hustle, and let's do a 3-year glide path, and then in 3 years, let's see if the nonprofit can pay you all that work you put in. And $60,000 or $70,000 is about right, even in North Omaha. The executive directors that really do this full time can make the $50,000 to $70,000 range but then again, a lot of them pay themselves $1 a month and say they don't pay themselves. But when you look at expenses or things that they benefit from running a nonprofit, most folks are around the $50,000 range, and that seems okay for all the work that they put in.
So I know when I'm meeting with a prospective client, generally within the first 5 or 10 minutes of conversation with them, I get a pretty good gut feeling as to whether or not they're going to be a successful client. Particularly from a coachability perspective. What have you found in your nonprofit world when you're first meeting with a person who says they want to create a nonprofit? What kind of questions do you ask, and what are you looking for that gives you a warm, fuzzy feeling that they're actually going to accomplish what they go after?
Well, clearly the passion for their mission, and are they going to be consistent towards that mission? And really, what's their integrity, and how do they build trust with me? When I first started out doing nonprofit advising, I took on anybody, and I thought I could take anybody. Now I tell folks I'm interviewing them. So it's like whoever I take on is going to be successful. So I'm interviewing you. And it sounds a little cocky and egotistic, because I remember one time I was a small business entrepreneur, and maybe I was talking to some business coach, and the business coach said, I'm interviewing you because I only have so much time. And I thought, when I first heard that, I'm like, what a cocky egomaniac that he's interviewing me, and I have the audacity to pay him. But then all of a sudden I started saying that a few years down the line, because if you pick the wrong client, it's miserable for both of you. So you really need to screen from both sides, both the person starting the nonprofit and to look for the nonprofit advisor. And I truly believe that we bring great value to the clients that we serve. We're like 15% of some of the nonprofit advisors out of New York City for what we do. We start the nonprofit and we meet with you for 8 weeks. Who else does that? We build momentum, and then when you have your letter, you have a full plan to go out and conquer the world and serve your mission. But certainly, I screen clients for the passion for their mission, for their integrity, and just for the fact that they're going to be consistent doing. And I ask people, can you do something for 20 minutes a day? You could probably build a nonprofit 20 minutes a day, but I need those 20 minutes, because every week I meet with you, I'm going to give you 3 homework items. I'm going to be Professor Lindenmeyer, and you're going to get your 3 homework items, and you're going to move on. So, but I do need the 20 minutes a day. I need that consistency. And then folks, I've tried to work with folks every other week and not weekly. And I really need consistency from the folks that want to just meet every other week. I need them to really be covering down on the things that need to get done, because twice a month is almost not enough to keep things going. And so we like to say we could be a mini staff for nonprofits that are starting out, and our rates are very inexpensive. This isn't a commercial, but I've just found that folks really need to focus on compliance in order to keep growing, because as they grow, a lot of foundations start looking for things to see if they're fully transparent with their books, to see who's on their board. Like, why don't they have some big hitters on their board? Have they not even thought about that yet? And so, why not a board of advisors? Why not get a two-star general? Why not get a former retired executive? Get some power on your board and just say, you know what, you're an advisor on my board, and all I need is 2 phone calls a year from you.
Mm-hmm.
Will you make 2 phone calls? And that's where things really start to move. But you really can't start building a cool board like that till the basics are put in place. And that's why I think it's a 3-year run, 2 to 3 years to get a nonprofit to the point where checks start falling out of the sky, and then people look at you and say, man, you're a rainmaker for fundraising. Like, how do you do it? It's like, well, I worked at it, and everything I do is fully transparent. I'm on GuideStar, I'm platinum transparent, all that kind of things that people look for. And that's why Teresa Huff's so great, because she does a grant readiness. She gets people to think about, are you grant ready? Like, I know you want a grant, but can we back up and say, are you even ready to talk about applying for a grant? And do you have the toolkit? And then Teresa really can set people up for success with that. And we start even earlier when they're starting the nonprofit. We're like, okay, we're starting to get you grant ready now. Like, here's your share drive with all the stuff that Teresa is going to ask you for. I really enjoy working with veteran-led, veteran-focused nonprofits. And what is that? Well, it's a veteran leading it as an executive director, and it's a veteran-focused mission. And it's so easy for people to get the leader and to get the mission and to give, because they see the veteran-led, they see the veteran focus, and then they write the check to support that because they see the linkage. When it's not like that, if you see like a non-veteran leading a veteran-focused mission, you're like, well, wait a minute, there's a disconnect there. Why is he not a veteran leading it? Okay, well, did his grandfather have a Medal of Honor? There's one nonprofit I talked to that had that sense, like, hey, I'm starting a nonprofit in honor of my grandfather who earned the Medal of Honor, and we're going to, immortalize his legacy. So, some neat nonprofit. There's one called Extreme Adventures, but when you look it up on the internet, you don't do the E. You start with the X, extremeadventures.org. And Toby Prudhomme heals veterans and families through amazing trips. So hunting antelope, deep sea fishing, scuba diving in Honduras. And somehow he's gotten it fully paid for when you go on these trips. And he doesn't over program. He allows a lot of decompression for the veterans and their families. And he encourages no alcohol because he doesn't want people to kind of blur the weekend and to kind of decompress. And it's, people really come back and say, I really appreciate the no alcohol or not pushing alcohol because it wasn't needed. This was an amazing trip. So, and he's doing really well fundraising wise, and because of that linkage. And another one, so that's a West Point grad, Toby Prudhomme, and a Naval Academy grad, Mike Stedman out of Newark, New Jersey. He's a Marine, and he has Ironbound Boxing Academy. And what they do is they build champions inside and outside of the ring. They teach you how to fight in the ring, but they also teach you how to thrive. And they have an entrepreneurship Thrive Academy. So they're teaching people almost like a mini Shark Tank. And this is young African American young males that are learning how to fight build champions inside and outside of the ring. And so that's a veteran-led nonprofit for a urban youth mission. So not veteran focused. But Mike is an incredible leader, incredible inspiration. He's a Fab 40 under 40. He's a Naval Academy 2010 grad. And he's a rainmaker when it comes to fundraising. I mean, there's very often we'll have a weekly meeting with him and he's like, yeah, I got another check. And how does he do that? Well, he really looks at his alumni network, and he looks at the target audience for donors, guys that appreciate boxing, guys that appreciate entrepreneurship, guys that appreciate, and gals that appreciate both. And those are the ones that say, you know what, you're right where you need to be. What do you need from me? And then this idea of an ecosystem for giving. When you read my bio, I hope people noticed that it said, well, I have a nonprofit advisory business, and a portion of the proceeds go to sacred activism community. And that's an ecosystem when you have friends, family, and professional network that say, you know what you're doing is so important for our world that I want to give a portion of my proceeds to that nonprofit. And so Mike has a classmate that's like, you know what, you got $3,000 a month going to Ironbound in perpetuity. What a blessing knowing that you have secured income going into your nonprofit in perpetuity. Like, oh my gosh, like that is building this ecosystem of for-profit generating money for nonprofit, and nonprofit delivering on services that they say are their mission. And I'll take a breather to let you ask a question, I guess.
Well, let's for a minute or two talk about that fundraising piece, or marketing for nonprofits. But by the nature of a nonprofit, you're asking people, businesses, some entity that has funds to contribute to your cause. They're not. It's not an exchange of value per se, right? I'm going to give you some money, and you're giving me a product or service back in exchange of value, right? It's a giving, it's a donation to a cause. So therefore, it's even more imperative in your marketing that you're creating an emotional connection with those that are the givers to your mission. What are some key things or important things if somebody is thinking about starting a nonprofit, and part of what they have to think about in their plan or their launch plan per se is marketing? How am I going to get fundraising? What are some things that they should be asking themselves when they're looking to put together a marketing / fundraising campaign to help push the nonprofit along?
Yeah, there's a neat link. It's Seth Godin, and he has a Seth Godin blog, and there's one blog that he wrote was the first 10. Who are your first 10? Who are the first 10 that you're going to tell that you fell in love? Who are the first 10 you're going to tell that you got engaged? Who are the first 10 you're inviting to your wedding? Have I explained the first 10 yet? Who are the first 10 that come to mind when you have new news? That is what we talk to people about. Who are your first 10 that you're going to be excited to say, I started a nonprofit. Can you help me $10 a month? Can you help me $25 a month? It's going to be such a big assurance knowing that my first 10 are behind me and I really need you. And so your network is so very important. And you talk about emotional connection. Your network will only sustain you for so long until you have to give them a feedback loop that says, here's a testimonial, here's a story, here's a real person that you helped. They got to get the feedback.
They get the ROI. What's the return on my investment, right?
Yeah, the ROI is I need feedback. I need to know that my money is helping. And I want a real person. I want you to get the waiver signed. You can change the name to protect the innocent, but I want a real made up name and I want a real story. I want testimonials. So you have to sustain yourself, you have to generate testimonials, and and then constantly thinking about who your target audience is. And it came out more organically with the Ironbound boxing. It's like, I want to target Naval Academy graduates. No, wait, every Academy graduate that had to take boxing as a required course and understands that fighting in the ring matters, maybe in combat, but it also matters in entrepreneurship. So I want Academy entrepreneurs who had to fight, had to box no matter what, because it was a required class, and that's my target donor. And when he approaches those folks, it's like they're already the checkbook's already open. Like, what are you asking for? Like, I understand you. I
Yeah,
get
you already got past the yes very quickly. Now it's
you. You're not having to
now it's
educate them about
negotiation
why
on the number.
yeah. But one thing I like to caveat that too is target audience for donors and target audience for mission is we're in a constantly shifting landscape. We're in a very chaotic world. Just turn on the news. We're in a very uncertain times, and your target audience is always shifting. And so you could say, hey, for example, today I'm going to do English as a second language for Haitian immigrants. Okay, that's a good mission statement, but remember, your mission statement could shift and change over time. Like, maybe it'll be Vietnamese immigrants, or maybe it'll be Syrian or Jordanian. I mean, it's going to shift a little bit. Same thing on your donor side. You have a target donor. So we drilled down into academy, graduate, entrepreneurs, and that's our target donor. Well, that could shift too as we start to really see success on the Thrive side and creating entrepreneurs. It's like, oh, now Mark Cuban wants to give. Like, can you go? We talk about, you got the 3-minute elevator talk with Mark Cuban. That's always our exercise with our executive directors. You got 3 minutes with Mark Cuban. How are you going to sell and get that check? So now you're the real Shark Tank for African American youth in Newark, and you're given $500 if they finish the incubator, and you're given $5,000 for the winner, and now you're a real Shark Tank, and now people are really getting attracted to that. Well, now your target donor audience is corporations within Newark and business schools, and Newark, Rutgers University, the College of Business wants to sponsor this. They want to have you do the Shark Tank, and they want to film it. So it keeps going and going, where now you're entrepreneurship targeted donors, and the boxing is a secondary. So to be ready to shift as the landscape shifts, and to be agile, adaptive, as leaders, we have to see the environment, we have to see the shifting landscape, and we have to adapt as things change. And that's one thing that, how do you do that? Well, you got to listen, you got to be flexible, you got to be open to ideas, and we all have to do that. My wife says I have to listen better every day, right? So, that's what a good executive director does, is they're very open and attentive to the folks they're serving. And like my partner says, Jeff Jernigan, who's fighting cancer, we do a shout out to him, fighting the good fight that he's going to kick cancer's butt here. He says your true stakeholders are your donors. That makes you really, it's like, if you're not doing that feedback loop, that return on investment, like you said, Andy, is all right. You lost your stakeholders. Those are the ones that are truly keeping things going, keeping the lights on. So you keep clear communication. Do you have a newsletter? Are you doing a monthly newsletter? Are you keeping them informed? Are you doing an annual report where you're showing all the great stuff you did for the past year? Are you asking for a paper check at the year end so they get a tax write-off? Over 30% of nonprofit money is raised in December. This is a big time. So yeah, you're going to get a couple letters in the mail. But even my good friend in Atlanta, who's a West Point classmate of mine, the Foundation for Hospital Art, it's over 30 years old in Atlanta, And Scott Fite is the executive director, my classmate. His father started the foundation, and they do the canvas paint by numbers that you see in hospitals, the long hallways in hospitals that need art. They get patients, families, and even folks that work at the hospital to paint these to be encouraged and to see bright colors when you're in the hospital
Mm-hmm.
fighting your fight. And that's the Foundation for Hospital Heart right out of Atlanta. And Scott taught me that a, quick executive director cover letter with an update of here's all the stuff we did this year, and we really need your support. Getting that letter to folks by Thanksgiving and then receiving a paper check 2 or 3 weeks later is still a viable donation route, because boomers still write paper checks, and others still, and it's not just online donations. It is still a paper check, so that's how you do that. And Scott taught me a lot in that. So we do a free monthly nonprofit circle where we invite executive directors to just circle up and just talk about any issues they have. And we have experienced executive directors like Scott there that says, hey, here's how you do that. And it's just a great little free monthly circle to kind of come in and say, hey, I got a problem. Can you guys solve it? Yeah, I solved that problem 3 years ago. Here's how you do it. And Scott asked me last time, he's like, there's not many people in this circle. I said, well, I still want to do it because the people that show up have a real question. So we're still doing it. And it's the second Thursday of every month, and happy to get that out and get people on that invite for the nonprofit circle. A free resource for executive directors to talk to other executive directors.
Well, I think the stakeholder piece is very much underrated in the corporate world. I used to sit down with my team at Boeing, and we were in the consulting world, so obviously customer is king, and we want to deliver value to the customer and so forth. But we also have to remember that the CEO of the company is deciding how the resources in the company are going to be divvied up within the business. So we have to ensure that we're delivering value back to the company outside of the dollar signs. So whenever we completed a project, we were looking for ways that we can internally market or report back outcomes that our customers were getting, because we were working on airspace issues. So positive outcomes was affecting our airline customers. And so it was more than just dollars that we're returning back to the CEO. It's also value to other customers within the company that we want to make sure that we get credit for, right? For doing that work and doing it in such a way that it helps our other customers within the company. So need to be as focused on that as much as with your end customers, in this case the people that are on the other side of the mission in the nonprofit side. How can nonprofits make themselves more attractive to the workforce?
I've seen, well, when you say workforce, I think workforce development. I think there's a lot of, well, there's the English for a Lifetime Career Foundation, also out of Atlanta, Dr. Joel Floyd. And his for-profit is English for a Lifetime. They teach English as a second language courses. They have 2 campuses around Atlanta. And he's very prominent on LinkedIn, or at least my LinkedIn feed. I'm very impressed by his daily LinkedIn posts. And he approached me. He said, I want to start a nonprofit for career foundation, a EFL career foundation. I want to help people build certifications and professional certifications to get a higher skilled, higher paid job. So not only do they get English as second language, now they're going to get a certificate and start to move up. I think that's very attractive for the workforce and for corporations to see, wow, this nonprofit's actually doing something that we should be doing, and they're doing it because we're busy trying to serve our shareholders and make profit, and now they're actually helping our workforce become higher skilled.
Mm-hmm.
We should help that nonprofit with a check. And oh, by the way, it's a tax write-off. So CDL drivers academies, there's a huge need in our country right now for commercial driver's licensed drivers. And I see a lot of nonprofits falling in on that niche. And so, you know, tourism, circulating. We have a tour in North Omaha, the North Omaha Legacy Tour, and they circulate potential consumers through North Omaha. They drop them off for a soul food lunch, and they get to see all the new development and all the stories, maybe the rich jazz history from the 20s of North Omaha, where Preston Love's dad, Preston Love Jr.'s dad, Preston Love was a famous saxophone player. And so the stories and the tourism can oftentimes become a nonprofit. And then also what the story about Mike Stedman and this ecosystem between for-profit and nonprofit. Mike Stedman has become a visionary that says there's no boxing gym in the country that should not have a nonprofit associated with it, because you cannot run a gym with $100 a month locker fees. And these boxing gym owners don't get it. They're living on poverty. You think about the Rocky movie with
Mm-hmm.
Mickey saying, "Get out of here, you bum. I'm not even giving you a locker," right? And you hear that story, but then you realize it's like, that's every gym in America. Well, if they have a nonprofit associated with something that's barely getting along, but we know it's needed, then let's have these partnerships. And I think if people just assume their daily life and start looking around saying, wow, why is that entity barely surviving? What if there was a nonprofit associated with it that was giving it a different lens that says, hey, we're here to help people. We're not here to be money grubbers. And that's really what a nonprofit does. It creates this ecosystem where it's like, hey, this is a greater good organization. You really need to help us out here. You need to write a check. You need to get behind this. You're going to feel good about doing it.
So when we talk about the business world and where business is going in general, you know, the conversation is going to start meandering towards artificial intelligence and IT type things and how it's changing the business field, the whole work from home conversation after the pandemic and so forth. They're all things that are kind of shaping the future of the business world. Where is the future of nonprofits going? What's driving the growth or direction of nonprofits like AI and work from home is on the business side?
I haven't thought of it with AI, although I do use a lot of Chat GPT with nonprofit leaders that need help. Like, I need a, here, let's do a draft and let's iterate with Chat GPT. And then a few iterations down, it's like, isn't that a better grant submittal? Or isn't that a better blog? So we are using Chat GPT on the nonprofit side as well. What I think about where nonprofits are going is, uh, I hate to go back to the white privilege, but how can nonprofits close the economic equality gap? We're seeing greater gaps, not less gaps, between socioeconomic groups. And I believe the nonprofit field is rich with opportunity to close economic equalities. And I also believe, though, that it's those that are in need that could start the nonprofits. So those that are in need, that see the needs, you don't really need someone outside with the money. You can see these grassroots nonprofits really come up from North Omaha or other socioeconomic uh, places that really need the help. It's the people that see problem that start the nonprofit themselves. And it's that's where you see the greatest passion and the greatest drive to make a difference. And it really does happen. So I think that's where nonprofits are really going and moving in the future, is to really, from my perspective, is encouraging those in need to see the need and do something about it themselves and start their own nonprofit, and then begin to communicate that need to others and really close that gap with the help of benefactors, with the help of donors, and then communicating that return on investment back.
Well, unfortunately, our time is coming to a close. We can't thank you, Colonel, enough for coming onto the podcast and sharing your expertise and wisdom with the listening audience. If somebody's noodling with the idea of starting a nonprofit, or just wants more information about nonprofits in general, what's a great way they can reach out to you?
We have a website, beacon4today.com, that you can get on. You can kind of see, what are you dreaming of doing, and really exploring that. You can set up a time to talk, a half-hour appointment. We can explore that with a potential person noodling an idea, and really just see where they're at, and then probably give them homework to go scan the environment and make sure. And before you invest in anything, let's make sure this is a really good idea, and who's on your team, and let's explore your network, and who's your first 10. So all the things that we talked about today, we really want a potential client to think about those things before they even spend a dollar with us, because it's not about making the money. It's about really making a difference, serving others, and really just making sure that that nonprofit's going to be successful, because it has all of our names behind it. So thanks for your time today, Andy.
So, Colonel, we have one last question for you. It's the same question we ask all of our guests. We like to see where the answers go and where the common thread is between everybody's answers to this one question. And that question is, what do the words "generate your value" mean to you?
I believe generate your value means self-development, means constantly learning, lifelong learning, and most particularly it's about self-care too, so that you can sustain that idea of generating your value to serve others, or generating your value to make our world better. So the key being self-care and self-development. So it's a great tagline, and it really grows on you. So great job with that, Andy.
The Colonel and I were talking in the green room before he hit the record button, and he kind of admitted that when he first heard it, he's like, huh, what? And it's as he noodled on it, it's like, no, wait a minute, that's a great tagline. I like that.
I'll give you the kudos.
Yeah, everybody has their own path. What we care about is you get to the destination, right? So that being said, to the listening audience, we can't thank you enough for tuning in to this episode of the Generate Your Value podcast. We hope you, particularly if you're interested in the nonprofit world, got, Colonel, what we call golden nuggets out of our conversation that people can take away and integrate into their life or their leadership or their business in an effort, like you said, to keep growing, right? In an effort to keep living a life that generates more and more value for themselves through self-care and so forth, but also for others. So that being said, we're here every week with a great guest like the Colonel. We hope you'll tune in next week. Hit that subscribe button so you make sure you don't miss an episode. Don't forget, we are now on YouTube. This is our first season having the visuals, so you get to see this face every week. Out on YouTube, just search Generate Your Value in the search field on YouTube. You'll find us. It's obviously the exact same interview, you just get to see pictures compared to if you go over to Apple Podcasts or somewhere else. But anyway, have a great day, have a great week, keep generating your value in the world, and we will see you next time right here on the Generate Your Value podcast. Take care. Thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of the Generate Your Value podcast. If you find our conversations to be useful in your life, I invite you to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss an episode.
You can find me online at Instagram at _Zach.Levy, Facebook, and LinkedIn.
For information on my coaching services, visit my website at www.generateyourvalue.com. You can also find me and my company on LinkedIn, Facebook, X, and Instagram. Simply search for Generate Your Value on those platforms.
Once again, thanks for joining us for today's podcast, and we invite you to generate your value in this world.